Uh, this is the Province 5 Migration Ministry Network meeting of October 21st, 2021. We are recording a section of this meeting as Mother Julie from the Diocese of Fond du Lac shares information with us. Mother Julie, thank you for being with us, and you have the floor.
Okay, now we will go to this. There we go. Okay, so a little bit about me. I was speaking with Sally as we got on to Zoom, and this is my grandson right there, because why not put a shameless plug for my grandson in there. I grew up I was born in Evanston, Illinois, was baptized in St. Matthew's, and my entire family went to St. Matthew's for generations. So when two members of St. Matthew's are on, it made me smile. I moved to Wisconsin when I was 8, and we lived in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And I spent the rest of my growing up time, even through college, in Wisconsin. I'm married. I have 3 adult kids, 1 awesome grandchild that you can see right there. I have lived and worked in 6 different countries in Latin America and Africa. I'm the former spokesperson for the American Immigration Lawyers Association in Washington, D.C. It is a over 1,000 member organization of lawyers that advocate on behalf of immigration and immigration reform. And I'm currently a rector of a small but thriving Episcopal church in the Diocese of Fond du Lac, St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Waupaca, Wisconsin. And Carol is one of my wonderful parishioners. So that's a little bit about me. Immigration in the United States is kind of what we call the third rail of politics. It's not when one tries to talk to people on Capitol Hill about immigration, they'd rather talk about anything but. No political party wants to espouse too much support for immigrants because they, quote, take away jobs, they break the law by crossing the border, undocumented immigrants aren't vetted, they could be criminals. And these are all like things people say. That's not what I believe, things people say. This is sometimes said about legal immigrants as well. Racial, and there's a lot of racial, cultural biases and xenophobia that goes along with immigration. I need to say this up front. What we are going to talk about today is incredibly basic because immigration law is as complex as tax law. There are so many nuances that I struggled to maintain the brevity. Sally asked me if that it was going to be brief, and I said, I hope so. Because it is a very complex system that we have, one that does not function well. And we can get into the questions about the functioning of the immigration system that we currently have. I'm not going to talk about the history of immigration. That's a whole nother subject. I'm going to solely talk about the immigration system that we have today and the basics of that immigration system. So there are 7 types of immigration in the United States. There's family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, refugees and asylees. There's the diversity visa program, humanitarian relief, and U.S. citizenship. Family-based immigration is the principle of when it comes to U.S. immigration policy, or so they say, because they say, and I'm saying they because I'm going to be very honest here. I have a very complete bias about how dysfunctional the immigration system is, and I ask your apologies, but I've seen a lot of pain and agony that go along with our immigration system. So I'm not a very nice person when it comes to how the politicians have handled this. But they say family reunification is the most important principle governing U.S. immigration policy. Family-based immigration allows U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents, otherwise known as green card holders, to bring certain family members to the United States. Family-based immigrants are admitted either as immediate relatives of U.S. citizens or through the family preference system. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to just, raise your hand or say, hey, I have a question, because I only see like 5 people. Immediate relatives and they of U.S. citizens can bring U.S. citizens can bring in spouses, unmarried minor children, and parents, and the petitioner must be at least 21 years old. There are unlimited number of visas for these types of immigrants. And this is important because I will talk about a cap system. It gets very complex. I'm going to completely simplify it, but it is incredibly complex and with a lot of numbers and percentages, but I'm boiling it down to a very basic kind of thing. There are limited visas available for the adult children, married and unmarried, and brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens. And there are spouses and unmarried minor and adult children of legal permanent residents or green card holders. So family-based immigration by the number. You can see there's a preference allocation. U.S. citizens get preference for 23,400. There's a numerical limit on that. Immediate relatives for U.S. citizens, spouses, unmarried children, and parents, unlimited numerical limit. Green card holders can bring in spouses and minor children, 87,900 per year. And I'm not going to continue to read, but you can see that there's a preference allocation for each kind of category. Yeah. And within each of those categories, we also have a cap system based on the country that you come from. So it gets very tedious and very wild. So I'm going to just leave that there. You can look at it for a minute or so.
Wow.
Just a quick question, Mother Julie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you say something about unused visas from the preference 1 and 2 or so, who determines that, and how do you know those are available?
The good question. The State Department, of course, issues all visas for anybody. And it's the consular section, the visas section of every State Department, every embassy issues visas. So when you obtain a visa, if you're a legal permanent resident and you petition to get your spouse and your minor children, for example, your preference 2A, you're a legal permanent resident, meaning a green card holder, and you petition for your spouse and your minor children. Let's say they're from Guatemala and you're a Guatemalan national, but you're a green card holder. 87,900 people worldwide can come in through that. So if you have a spouse and 3 kids, that would be 4 people, okay, 4 visas. So they would count those visas because they have a very complex computer system in which they take down all the visas and who's got what, and they do background checks out on everybody, and it's very, very detailed. When, for example, if there are any unused visas from 1 or 2, they would automatically jump to 3 or 4. And then, it's kind of like, those unused visas. And then, it's an infrequent unused visa because our visa system is, a lot of people like to come here. So, And yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
I guess what I was asking is, for example, if you hire legal help
Yes.
to put this through, would they know that 1 and 2 still have some visas left over?
No, you know, you don't know. And this is what I say for, you know, if you are ever in a position of advising immigrants on any immigration issue, I strongly encourage you to have them seek legal counsel. Don't have them seek any kind of, legal aid or anything like that. I really a lawyer. It's a complex system. If you do something wrong, you can get somebody permanently banned from the country.
Yes.
And it's, it's not something that I would ever want to have. I've seen too much hurt and pain go through bad, advice to immigrants. So anyway, no, you wouldn't know. You only know at the end of the year whether there's any unleft visas. So.
But at that time, they have already been taken up by other people, right?
Well, 1 and 2 would have been taken up if they have already been taken up. If they haven't been taken up, they would automatically go to 3 and 4. And so they wouldn't, whatever. There is a backlog, for instance, of green card holders petitions for family members from Mexico of 1 million people right now. So, for instance, if you are a green card holder, your preference allocation number 2A, and you're petitioning your spouse and your minor children to come over, 1 million petitions are backlogged right currently. And that's the part of the system that doesn't work. It's just broken and irretrievably, people can't get through the system. If you've only got 87,900 people that get visas, you're never going to get through the million person backlog. So yes.
So it doesn't carry over to the next year.
Nope.
If there's
It ends at the end of the year, and you have to reapply.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So employment-based immigration. The United States provides various ways for immigrants with valuable skills to either come to the country on an either permanent or temporary basis. I'm not going to talk about the permanent employment-based immigration because a lot of the people that you deal with are not the permanent employment-based immigration. Those people are like the highly skilled workers, like doctors, engineers, people like that have, very specialized skills, and they come in with a permanent employment-based immigration. What is typical when you're dealing with migrants is the temporary employment-based immigration. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. So I apologize. I'm going to just skip right over the permanent, and I'm going to go right to temporary. So for every visa, there is a per country ceiling. Forgive me, I'm going to read this because then we can discuss it, and then I can summarize it. In addition to numerical limits that we just talked about, the 87,900 people for preference 2A, in addition to the numerical limits placed on various immigration preference categories, the Immigration Naturalization Act also places limits on how many immigrants can come to the United States from any one country. Currently, no group of permanent immigrants, that means family-based and employment-based combined, come from a single country can exceed 7% of the total number of people immigrating to the United States in a single fiscal year. So we've got let's take the Mexican backlog right now. Only 7% of permanent immigrants will make it through because they're coming all from one country, Mexico. Okay. This is not a quota to ensure. Now, this is what they say. This is not a quota. This is what they say. And I'm going to just say, this is my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer anymore. I used to be a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer anymore. And I'm sure that I'm going to say things that any lawyer could pick apart right now, but I'm going to give you their line, and I'm going to tell you what I think. This is not a quota to ensure that certain nationalities make up 7% of immigrants, but rather a limit that is set to prevent any immigrant group from dominating immigration flows to the United States. The fact of the matter is that we only have certain countries that actually like to immigrate here. We don't have a lot of immigrants coming from France. So France rarely makes its 7%.
Or Sweden.
Right. You choose your country, certain countries don't come here that often, but you've got other countries that actually want to come here quite frequently. There is, in the last paragraph, there is currently legislation which argues for the elimination of the per country limitations for employment-based immigrants, because individuals should become permanent residents based on the skills they bring to the United States and not their nationality. That's sponsored by the American Immigration Lawyers Association, because visas are restricted for a lot of workers, especially coming from Latin America and Africa. So I wanted to give you that this is, not only do we have a preference for certain types of people that come in, family-based preference, we also have a country ceiling or a cap for every country for those people as well. So let's talk about temporary worker visas. A temporary employment-based visa classification permits employers, and this is important to understand, employers to hire and petition for foreign nationals for specific jobs for limited periods. That means that the farm, let's say the farm in Michigan, needs to know Antonio from Nicaragua, needs to know him, and needs to know all of the pertinent information to apply on his behalf. Antonio cannot do it himself. The employer does it.
Oh,
Okay. So
well, wait.
that's the first thing. So how do these places get their workers? Good question. Because how would they even know them if they're coming from a different country? I don't know. Maybe they work maybe they're undocumented and they work for a while and they say, next year I'll hire you as, and ask you, to work under a visa. I don't know. I really don't know how that system works, but that is the current system that we have. Most temporary workers must work for that employer and that petition for them. So if that employer mistreats them in any way, they are required to leave the country if they want to not work for that employer, because they have very limited ability to change jobs. They are under, the visa strictly prohibits them for working for that employer. So there are 3 temporary worker visas. There's the H-1B visa, which requires a college degree. Typically, these are the data processing, the programmer visas, that kind of thing. They college degree, master's degree kind of thing. We call them the tech visas. The H-2A is the agricultural worker visa, and the H-2B is the non-agricultural worker. Typically, it's kind of like working in resorts, anything that's not agricultural that you can see a seasonal employee working at. So in most cases, these workers must leave the United States if their status, meaning if they are fired from their job, or if their status expires, so like the job ends, or if they're fired from their job. So temporary worker visas, these are the main ones. H-1B, as I said before, workers in specialty occupations, qualifications are bachelor's degree and above. 3 year, you can get a 3-year visa with the option to renew once, and then you can convert to permanent resident. The preference in our immigration system is always for educated people who have money to invest in the United States. That's just plain and simple. Poor people are not preferred at all. So the annual cap, remember we've got preferences for so if, let's say you wanted to convert your H-1B visa, which is a temporary worker visa, to become a legal permanent resident after 3 years. So you've got an annual cap for the H-1B visa of 65,000 plus 20,000 for graduates with advanced degrees. And then you want to, and you can bring in your family on your H-1B visa, your spouse and your minor children. So you want to convert to a legal permanent resident, then you have to be under those preference treatments by the country again. So it gets all the numbers get very crazy. H-2A, the seasonal agricultural workers, are from one of 59 eligible countries. I didn't want to put up the list, I'm sorry, but I just decided that the list was too big and too long. So it's a 1-year visa, renewable up to 3 years. So basically 3 years on, off 1 and 3 years on again, if you're on a visa. H-2Bs are seasonal non-agricultural workers. They've got a landscaper, I guess that's non-agricultural, from one of 59 eligible countries, up to 1 year, renewable to 3 years. The H-2B visa, it has a cap of 66,000. Any questions about the temporary worker visas?
I got to say, I'm loving the footnotes. This is just so weird.
Yeah. So the H-2A, which are our agricultural worker visas, which are, when we're talking about migrant workers and we're talking about undocumented workers, they mainly fall into this category. Sometimes they might fall into the H-2B visa, which is, maids, landscapers, that kind of thing. But a lot of the undocumented workers would fall into the H-2A agricultural worker visa. To get, let's say you're an employer and you know a ton of people that you can hire from El Salvador. I'm picking different countries because I know that these are the countries. First, you have to get certified that no US citizen is interested in the jobs that you have to offer and that you desperately need workers to maintain your company. So you get this, so you can see down at the bottom, the blue is job certified. So you've got to first get yourself certified. Then you've got to get your workers, and the the visas issued are always much less than the jobs certified, as you can see. And year 2020, we're up to 250,000 jobs certified and almost 200,000 visas issued for H-2A agricultural workers.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you, it almost sounds like none of the agricultural workers would be from countries close to the United States, southern countries like Mexico, because of that high limit on people from certain countries. So
7%.
These workers are coming from faraway countries.
No, you have to think the agricultural industry is a huge industry. So 200,000 people is actually not very many people. That doesn't even help California. And so, when you're looking at, this is for the entire United States. Currently, there's estimates of 11 million to 12 million undocumented people in the United States. So if those people are, a lot of those people are either H-2A or H-2A, they would fall into H-2A or H-2B visa holders if they could get a visa. We're not even reaching 1 million. you know, and these people are doing work that needs to be done. Construction, they're doing all sorts of stuff that needs to be done, and we're not filling that at all. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
So
pardon me?
they're undocumented, and that we just kind of slide that by because we need them to work.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I see. Oh,
And
okay.
and frankly, it's you know, in my opinion, it's a way to severely underpay and mistreat people who one are uneducated or have less education, can't navigate the complexity of our immigration system, would never
Huh.
go to a lawyer in the first place because they don't have the money, the resources. The mechanism in and of itself makes in my opinion, an undocumented worker, it's virtually impossible if you have a third grade education for you to navigate the system, much less, you know, college educated. You know, this is, you know, as complex as the tax code. So, you know, yeah. And we're only given, you know, 200,000 visas a year. So.
And it's my understanding that a lot of the undocumented farm workers are hired, or maybe all undocumented workers, but anyway, many are hired by brokers who then they supposedly handle all the paperwork so that companies then hire them from the agency, so they're not held accountable for those workers being undocumented.
Right. And it's
Oh.
just a real scam is what it is. And, you know, Carol, at my church, we're starting a migrant ministry program. We've got a bunch of agricultural workers in our county and in surrounding counties. And just driving around, you see the kind of living conditions that they live in.
Oh my God.
If they come, these undocumented workers, if they come as a family unit, they separate males from females so they don't even live with their family. It's just, it's really kind of an atrocious kind of thing. And I don't know, I'll get myself all worked up. Let's go on. Refugees and asylees. Refugees are admitted to the United States based on, and this is important to understand, an inability to return to their home country because of a well-founded fear of persecution. This is that phrase, well-founded fear of persecution, keeps many people from actually becoming refugees. For example, if you are in Honduras, which has an atrocious gang problem right now, atrocious. People, that's why we had so many migrants, you know, the 5,000 migrants coming up to the border at the end of President Trump's administration. They were escaping these gangs that were preying on them. If you're willing to walk 2,000 miles to safety, I would say that's well-founded fear of persecution. A lot of these people were turned away. Because they were turned away because these are the categories that it has to fit in. Race, member of a particular social group, political opinion, religion, and national origin. So, for example, if you're a woman being harassed by gang members in Honduras, where would you fit? You don't fit anywhere in any of those 5 categories.
Mother Julie, was this when the Trump administration and, you know, people were saying we aren't going to accept people who are fleeing gangs or domestic violence?
Right.
Yeah. What kind of proof do they have to have to
That's
show
the
that
issue,
they
is
did
like,
it?
how, you know, so you've been, and, you know, imagine in your head, you're a woman, 35 years old, you've got a teenage daughter, perhaps of 15 years old, and you're trying to protect her from the gangs who will rape her as an induction into their gang. You're trying to protect yourself from being raped. How do you know, if you've got a third grade education, that you have to have documentation that the gangs are going to rape and kill you? And how do you know to do that? Nobody tells you. They just leave, as we all would. We would just leave. This keeps out a lot of people, in my opinion. A lot of people with who need our help. Let me go on. Refugees apply for admission from outside the United States. So when they get to so generally it's from a transition country. So if you were that Honduran woman, you would come to Mexico, and in Mexico, you would apply for refugee status. Okay, you'd make it to Mexico and apply for refugee status. These Haitian people that just recently crossed the Rio Grande, they actually were living in Mexico for quite a while. So they actually are refugees. They were not because of the hurricane and the earthquake. They were living in Mexico and came up through Mexico. So they are technically refugees. But okay, so the admission of refugees turns on numerous factors, such as the degree of risk they face, the membership in a group that is of special concern to the United States, which is designated yearly by the President and Congress, and whether or not they have family members in the United States. If they have family members who have any visa in the United States, makes their lives super much easier.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't. Each year, the president, in consultation with Congress, determines the numerical ceiling. Again, we have another cap for refugee admissions. The overall cap is broken down into limits for each region of the world. So here is the 2021 cap. So you can see Latin America, we get 5,000. Latin American and the Caribbean, which includes Haiti, gets 5,000 people. And that's not realistic in my opinion, but
I think this was the lowest ever, thanks to President Trump.
yes, it was. Yes.
I think historically, hasn't it been more around 300,000 a year, which
Yes,
it really
and
isn't that much when you
No,
think of the
it's
number
not.
of refugees in the world.
No.
So Biden raised it for 2022. He didn't raise it for 21 at all.
A lot of this also has to do with COVID as well. So, COVID impacted immigration as it impacted all of
Right.
us. So,
Right.
if you could prove that you had, any vaccine, you all automatically were eliminated from
Come to the
entering the
top.
United States. So
Yeah.
that also impacted everything.
Mother Julie, what is the
Yep.
unallocated reserve used for?
That's for anybody. So for instance, the Haitian refugees that just appeared on our border at the Rio Grande, that would be like, they didn't anticipate that. There were several thousand there, and that would go for that. It's an unallocated reserve. It's due to war, the Afghan refugees, they're Central Asia, 4,000 only. Well, we need more than that. So that also goes to that as well. So, it's in response to what is happening in the world.
But did the United States accept any from Haiti? I just remember them sending them back in planes.
That's what I've heard. I'm a rector of a church now, so I can't pay 100% attention to immigration, but that's what I've read too, is that they sent them all back, and back through to Mexico. So.
Okay. Ugh.
So asylees are a little bit different than refugees. People like to use the words interchangeably, but they're not. Asylum is available to persons already in the United States. This is an important distinction.
Oh,
Refugees are applying outside the United States. Asylees are already in the United States.
Or at the border, right? You can ask for
Exactly.
asylum
That's
at
that's
the
that's
border.
exactly it. It's at the border or inside the United States. And I'm using a photo of Cuban asylees because people like to call them refugees, but they're actually asylees. So the deal with the Cuban asylees is that they are when they get on a boat and they come over from Cuba, if they can get to shallow enough water where they're walking on the sand, they are technically in the United States. The Coast Guard tries their best to keep them out into international water and not capture them, but push them back out into international water before they can get into US waters. If they can get into US waters, then they can ask for asylum. And then they are actually political asylees. And the 5 protected grounds are the same as refugees. And that's why I think often people interchange the terms asylees and refugees, but really refugees are from outside the United States and asylees are either at the border, which is technically the United States, and inside the United States. So they may apply at the port of entry at the time they seek admission or within 1 year of arriving in the United States. So if if you come in and let's say you happen to snag a visa to go see Disney World, but you're actually, from some country that's going through political turmoil, you can ask for asylum while you're visiting Disney World. There's no limit on the number of individuals who may be granted asylum each year, nor are there specific categories for determining who may seek asylum.
Is that, Mother Julie, is that not the reason they try to keep them away
Yes.
from getting, because even from the Mexico border, they try to push them way out there to stay out so that they don't become,
right. And technically when those men, the immigration officers were on horseback and whipping them, I mean, they can just say, I request asylum, I'm in the United States. Now, does a normal person know how to do that? No. So, they don't know how to do that. Fiscal year 2019, 46,508 individuals were granted asylum. Refugees and asylees are eligible to become legal permanent residents 1 year after admission to the United States as a refugee or 1 year after receiving asylum. The diversity visa program, and now not a lot of people know this. The diversity visa program was created by the Immigration Act of 1990 as a dedicated channel for immigrants from countries with low rates of immigration to the United States. So each year, 55,000 visas are allocated randomly through a computer-generated lottery. It's called the lottery visa. As well, to nationals from countries that have sent fewer than 50,000 immigrants in the United States in the previous 5 years. Of the 55,000, up to 5,000 are made available for use under the Nicaraguan Adjustment and Central American Relief Act. So really, there's only 50,000. Diversity visas are now distributed on a regional basis and benefit Africans and Eastern Europeans in particular, because there's low immigration rate from certain African and Eastern European countries. To be eligible for a diversity visa, potential applicants from qualifying countries must have a high school education or have within the past 5 years, a minimum of 2 years working in a profession requiring at least 2 years of training or experience. If you get a diversity visa, if you win the lottery, spouses and minor unmarried children may also enter as derivatives. So the Trump administration shut down the diversity visa program in 2020 and left 43,000 of that year's lottery winners without their visas. They never got them. So
another thing I was going to mention is that this diversity visa is pretty expensive to apply for. So people might want to do so, but the amount of funds that is needed.
Yes, you have to prove that you actually are not going to be reliant on the US government assistance. And the paperwork is pretty atrocious. So people do it. I mean, people win every year. So, it happens. But, you got to be dedicated but it is a program. So humanitarian relief. TPS, I don't know if you've heard about TPS, temporary protected status. Currently, Nicaraguans and Salvadorians are under TPS, temporary protected status. It's granted to people who are in the United States but cannot return to their home country because of natural disaster, extraordinary temporary conditions, and ongoing armed conflict. And TPS is granted to various different people. You can, change your TPS status and get legal permanent residence as well. Deferred enforcement departure provides protection from deportation for individuals whose home countries are unstable. Unlike TPS, which is authorized by statute, deferred enforcement departure is at the discretion of the president. So deferred enforced departure does not necessarily lead to legal permanent resident status or confer any other immigration status. DACA. All of us have heard about DACA, or I hope you have, because when I was working at the American Immigration Lawyers Association, we wrote the DREAM Act, and DACA is the second iteration of the DREAM Act. So, and I'm proud that I was at least able to participate in that. DACA is a program established in 2012, which permits certain individuals who were brought to the United States while under the age of 16 and who have resided continuously in the United States since June 15, 2007, to remain in the United States and work lawfully for at least 2 years. Now, when we wrote the DREAM Act initially, we wanted everything. We put everything in the kitchen sink in there. We wanted them to be able to be able to get legal permanent residence. We wanted them to, have, to be able to stay as long as they needed to. Sometimes you have to give up things, and apparently that's what they did to get DACA. So they have to prove that they've got no significant criminal record. This is an important thing, and I'm going to highlight it for you because DACA, especially for people who are of Latino heritage, for instance, my two youngest kids are of Guatemalan descent, and I have repeatedly told them, please don't get pulled over. Please don't, have marijuana on you when you're in a state that doesn't allow marijuana. Please don't, X, Y, and Z. Even though they are naturalized citizens, a lot of naturalized citizens have been, in the run up to DACA, been swept up by immigration ICE and sent back to wherever they think they come from. It has been actually the thing that ICE has done to damage DACA the most, is take these kids with minor traffic violations, marijuana possessions, and use that as a means to get them out of the country. And these are kids who have grown up here. I mean, these are not, they're as American as you and me, without the little piece of paper. So
the worst part of it is that one of the things that we really have problem with ICE was some of these children, they don't even know the country.
Right. No, I know. I honestly, I was actually in, and it's actually unfortunate, but it's more geared towards men than it is, my hesitancy about, my warning for people of Latino heritage is more for men than it is for women, because they seem to pick on men a lot. I don't know why, but yeah.
And
Anyway.
they better not have any problem with their car, even though they are not allowed to have driving licenses.
Right. So unfortunately, DACA, when we wrote the DREAM Act initially, it did confer a path for legal permanent residence, but now it doesn't. And it requires renewal every 2 years. Under President Trump, he stopped the renewal. I don't know if you recall that, but that made a lot of people who had DACA status, who needed to renew, fear that they were going to be picked up as undocumented immigrants, you know, it created havoc, because these are people who've grown up here. The Violence Against Women Act was passed by Congress in 1994, actually by Joe Biden. He was the sponsor of the bill. This creates a special route to lawful immigration status for victims of domestic abuse who normally must rely on their abusers to file. So if you think about it, if your husband is the legal permanent resident or the person who holds the visa, you're reliant on him to get you your visa. And a lot of abusive husbands, and I'll just say husbands, I'm sure that there are probably some wives out there as well, but a lot of abusive husbands will use the visa status of their spouse as leverage, and in an abusive relationship, use that to manipulate her. So the Violence Against Women Act was created to allow victims of abuse to apply for legal status for themselves. Humanitarian parole allows for certain individuals to enter the United States even though they may not meet the definition of a refugee. Humanitarian, and so remember we talked about a refugee, and what if you were a woman who was 35 years age and you had a 15-year-old daughter and you're escaping the gangs? This is supposedly used for that. It's actually not granted that often. So they say, but there's humanitarian parole, and then a lawyer will file for a humanitarian parole, and you know, it's a roll of the dice. And then finally, citizenship. In order to qualify for U.S. citizenship through naturalization, an individual must have been a green card holder, legal permanent resident for at least 5 years, or 3 years if he or she obtained the green card through U.S. citizen spouse or through Violence Against Women Act. Some exceptions, of course, are if you have served in combat in the U.S. military and adoptions. There are other exceptions as well. Applicants for U.S. citizenship must be at least 18 years old, demonstrate continuous residency. They can't leave. So that's, you know, you can leave with your green card, but you can't, there's a very small window, and you can't like go for several years overseas or even several months. It's a very strict thing. Demonstrate good moral character, pass the English and U.S. history and civics exams, and pay application fees, among other requirements. And so that is it. That is my.
Wow.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I have read that the United States has more immigrants than any other country in the world, which seems incomprehensible given this voodoo maze. And by the way, I was not born in the United States. How on earth is it possible that with this obstacle course, and I've always had the impression this was deliberately designed not to work, that this is not some accidental bad system, that this is a deliberately hazing kind of system. How is it that we still manage to have so many immigrants?
I honestly believe that it's through the diligence of immigration rights activists, through the diligence of immigration attorneys. There are people out there dedicated to making sure that this dysfunctional system creeps along somehow. We actually do have the highest immigration numbers in the world. But yes, you are right. It is a behemoth that doesn't work. And unfortunately, for a lot of the people who would benefit from a functioning immigration system, they become victims because they can't get the immigration system to function for them.
Right.
So.
Wow. Yeah, very sobering.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
This is amazing. I mean, I knew, and like you said, you know, each of us kind of works with our own different groups of immigrants, or maybe some of us belong to a specific group of immigrants, and to learn about the other categories and what they have to go through. And it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I have no words.
Yeah. And I didn't even get into like, you know, the university students and those visas and the diplomat visas. And I didn't get into all of the other visas. There's so many different types of visas. And I was just like, nah, I'm not going to do that. So.
Well, one of the things that bothers me was listening to EMN update the end of September. I don't know when it was, but they were saying they needed a lot of money for the parolees,
Yes.
basically, and they needed it for housing and food and that, but they
Mhm.
also needed it for legal costs because they have to pay for the immigration lawyers. And I'm like, how in the name of heaven can you expect them to pay lawyers' fees when
Right.
they can't even like get food? I mean, come
Right.
on. What's wrong
know.
with this picture?
I know. I know. And
I
that's
actually-
why the immigration system is so broken. It's, you know, and you know, I kudos to the immigration lawyers who work for like Catholic Relief Services and places like that give immigration legal advice at very inexpensive cost for most immigrants. And
Oh my God.
and there are immigration lawyers out there that do tremendous work. You know, and if you ever need an immigration lawyer, most immigration lawyers are members of AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. You can go to their website and you can say, hey, I need an immigration lawyer in this area. And if you're working with somebody who needs an immigration lawyer, and they will refer to you, refer someone to you. But it's a good organization. So
I had a question, and I don't know, Mother Julie, if you would know, or even Sylvia, if you would know. I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, but specifically with the Afghan refugees, they are eligible for certain benefits. However, is there some sort of contractual obligation to pay some of these benefits back in terms of medical or like state medical assistance, food stamps, that kind of thing? Or how does that work?
I don't know right now.
Okay.
I'm just, you know, I do know that they're limited to, I think it's 90 days of
The
assistance.
parolees.
Yeah.
Parolees,
Okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I know
FIV.
there's a limit.
it's 3 months worth of assistance, which
Okay.
having lived in 6 countries myself, 3 months doesn't do anything for you. Just
Well,
like
and all they
you're
get
not doing
out of it.
anything, you know.
And that's why they're asking for so many donations, because I am not an attorney, I'm a legal
Yeah.
assistant, but my organization we provide those low cost and free services, right?
Right.
We get a lot of grants from different organizations around the country and locally, and provide a lot of different services. But what I do know is that the Afghans, many of them are actually humanitarian parolees, which means they do not have
Right.
status. They have to apply for asylum, which is, there are some other options, but that's probably the one that they're most likely to qualify for. But, you know, technically, unless they're granted asylum, they could be sent back.
Right.
Even though we don't really have a established relationship with Afghanistan anymore, but I think technically they could be sent back. And I work with unaccompanied minors, and it's hard to tell them that because they are fearful, not just for themselves, but for their families that are still in Afghanistan. And that's what all they want is to bring their families over.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, they, like you all were saying, I think they get 90 days. So the government provides so much, and then nonprofits provide the rest.
Yeah.
So that's why they need churches like you all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, my church, you know, we did a little bit of fundraising. You know, it's just a small drop in the bucket, but that's why, the larger church, I think, you know, needs to, you know, we all need to go back to our churches and step up and say to our your rectors and your assistant rectors, hey, we need to start thinking about ways that we can do this for.
No, Mother Julie, I'm not gonna even let you do that.
But
She should brag way more, because this is a teeny tiny little church,
No.
and they raised we were shocked. They were shocked. You guys were even shocked at how much you raised for these Afghan refugees. It was amazing. And the news covered it, and we shared it all over the diocese. So she won't brag about it, but Carol and I will. It was truly amazing. I was floored when I saw that.
Well, it really truly is when you know how much money they need, it is such a small drop in the bucket. And I'm not trying to be humble, but I realize the complexity of the issue. And so we did the best we could. And I think we did pretty well for our small little church. But I think as Christians, we have an obligation to do this. So.
I just have a personal question. This is so totally off the topic. But I think the reason why I know of St. Mark's Walpaca is because my children were choristers at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and way back, I think we would come there and they would sing with the church.
That is so
That's probably true. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's sobering to me that one of the things that EMN sent out was that they're going to need over $4 million just to be the support for the parolees, because a parolee is going to get basically $1,195. That's their 90-day support check.
Yeah.
So think about that. So, and by that point, they had raised almost $230,000, of which are $7,000. It's all like, well, that helps. That potentially can help 7 parolees. Oh, that if they each get a little bit over $1,000. And so you begin to, when you get it down to individuals, you see like you said, the need to continue to get money and send donations.
And the other problem then is when they do start applying for pathways to citizenship, all that costs money. And, the hope is that the government's going to waive fees for Afghan parolees, but I don't hold out much hope for that.
I don't think so. Right.
I know Refugee One, that's who we're going to co-sponsor with, that they were telling us to anticipate a range of like $10,000 to $18,000 that we would need for a family, but that's sort of just the beginning, because you want this to be a relationship that, as I said, walking alongside them and with, and becoming, keeping more going and being supportive and also mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that to me seems like just a drop in the bucket, really.
Yeah.
And that's one family.
Yeah. So we do
Oh.
have now, I think, last I checked, since about 4 days ago, we have now 7 refugees here in Green Bay from Afghanistan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. And they're setting up teams. I'm in the last group, so I still have to wait for them to get my background check and everything passed before I can join. But in the meantime, I can help with creating like welcome kits. So we are very excited to get rolling. We're starting to send out welcome people, picking them up and stuff. So it's exciting, but it's also, like you guys said, it's very sobering, because you feel like I feel like this is not enough. It's not enough. We're trying so hard, but it's not enough.
I know. And that's the thing about immigration, is that you have to, I think you have to take a broad view and say, okay, you do as much as you can with the time that you have and the resources you have, and realize that it's a big fight. And whatever you can do, is got to be enough, because if you get too bogged down in the dysfunction of it, it gets a little depressing.
Yeah, yeah, so we
I
all
have to
have
say,
to,
a bright point here is that when we had our informational meeting and there were, others there, we were told we won't even know if we get accepted because there were so many applications. for it.
Nice.
yes,
That is a nice thing. See,
yes.
there's sunshine, amongst the clouds.
Uh,
Oh.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments before before I give the closing prayer?
I have one question, and this is
Yes.
just totally logistics.
Yeah.
We're supposed to meet November 18th. That's our next date. For those here, does that seem doable? Because I know we're getting close. It's not the week of Thanksgiving, it's the week
No,
before.
we have to
No.
change it.
Well, no, actually, that ends up being the
Oh, that,
third,
yes, you're right.
Thursday.
That is the
It's
third
the
one. Yep.
third.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That'll be
we're
fine.
safe.
Because if we do have to change it, and I'll send out an email, or Armida will, somebody will, about that also.
Yeah.
Or
And,
because of the holidays, would it be better just to have like an